¡Silencio, malditas! ¡Obedezcan o sufran las consecuencias!
¡Opresión! ¡Libertad, por favor!
The sun was sinking behind the distant mountains when the quiet village of San Isidro held its breath once again. Every evening carried the same fear, the same trembling silence, because no one knew who would be taken next to the hacienda on the hill, the home of Don Laureano, the ruthless landowner who had declared war not on men, but on faith itself. For him, belief in God was a sign of rebellion, a challenge to his authority. And for that, he punished people in the cruelest way imaginable. In those days, fear had a shape. It was the shadow of Don Laureano's riders galloping through the dusty roads. And it had a sound, the cries of families begging for mercy as their loved ones were dragged away. Rumors traveled faster than wind. Some whispered that the hacendado had lost his wife long ago and blamed heaven itself for his pain. Others said he simply hated anything that gave people hope, because hope made them stronger than fear. But no one truly knew the storms that raged inside his heart. Among the villagers lived a humble carpenter named Mateo, a quiet man with eyes full of kindness. Mateo had lost his parents young, and the church had raised him like a son. He believed deeply in love, in forgiveness, and in the invisible strength that faith could give. Yet, he kept his prayers silent, for to speak God's name aloud was to invite death. But even silence could not protect him. One cold morning, the soldiers found a small wooden cross in Mateo's workshop. It was meant for an elderly woman who feared dying alone and wanted to feel her faith close to her chest. That tiny cross, carved with love, sealed Mateo's fate. Don Laureano ordered him to be taken to the hacienda, and the villagers watched helplessly as the gentle carpenter was dragged up the hill, leaving behind only dust and broken hearts. Mateo was tied to a post in the courtyard of the hacienda, where dozens before him had suffered the same punishment. But he did not cry, nor beg. Instead, he looked up at the blazing sky and whispered a prayer, not for himself, but for Don Laureano's soul. Something about his calmness unsettled the hacendado, who prided himself on breaking spirits. "Why do you pray?" he demanded. "Your God will not save you." Mateo smiled softly, and in that moment, his kindness struck deeper than any weapon. "Perhaps not," he answered, "but maybe he will save you." Those words lingered in Don Laureano's mind long after he left the courtyard. They irritated him, confused him, even frightened him, because for the first time in years someone looked at him with compassion instead of fear. It was as if Mateo had looked straight into the wounded part of him that he had buried under layers of cruelty. 3 days passed. The village was drowning in grief, and hopelessness hung heavy in the air. But the world was about to change in a way no one expected. A rumor reached the village that Pancho Villa himself was riding across the region with his División del Norte. The villagers whispered the news like a miracle, for Villa was known not only for his fury against tyrants, but for protecting the poor and the innocent. Still, no one dared to hope too much. Hope, after all, had been punished for too long. But fate had its own timing. Just before dawn, the earth trembled with the sound of hundreds of hooves. Dust clouds rose like rolling thunder. Pancho Villa and his men appeared on the horizon, a powerful force of defiance and justice. Villa had been informed of Don Laureano's cruelty by a traveler, and unlike the villagers, he had the strength to face such darkness head-on. Villa's men stormed the hacienda like a whirlwind. Don Laureano's soldiers fell quickly, some fled, others dropped their weapons at the first sight of Villa's fury. The hacendado himself tried to run, but Villa cornered him in the courtyard, the same place where countless innocent people had suffered. When Villa saw Mateo tied to the post, bruised but still alive, something inside him ignited. He had seen tyranny before, but there was something particularly vile about a man who punished people for their faith. Villa turned to Don Laureano with a rage that shook the air, but Mateo whispered weakly, "Please, do not kill him." Villa stared at Mateo in disbelief. "After all he has done to you, to your people, you ask me to spare him?" Mateo nodded, faint but resolute. "He punishes faith because he has lost his own. Killing him will not heal anything. But mercy might." Villa was not a man easily moved, yet there was something in Mateo's voice, an unbroken gentleness, a strength that came only from deep conviction. Slowly, Villa lowered his gun. The courtyard grew silent, even the wind seemed to pause. Don Laureano collapsed to his knees, not out of fear, but because for the first time in years, someone had shown him compassion. And compassion was far more powerful than hatred. Tears he didn't know he could still shed streamed down his face. He looked at Mateo, the man he had tried to break, and whispered, "Why do you save me?" Mateo answered, "Because someone must end the suffering, and it cannot be done with more violence." In that moment, something inside the hacendado shattered, the bitterness, the anger, the grief. It all crumbled under the weight of the mercy he had never expected to receive. Villa ordered his men to free the captives and open the hacienda gates. Don Laureano, overwhelmed by guilt and awakening remorse, begged the villagers for forgiveness. Some turned away, but others, inspired by Mateo's example, took the first steps toward healing. Weeks passed, and slowly, the hacienda transformed. Don Laureano used his wealth to help rebuild the village, providing tools, seeds, and labor. He repaired the church he had once despised, even laying the first stone with his own hands. Mateo, though weakened, recovered, and his workshop once again filled with the sound of gentle carving. One evening, as the golden light bathed the village, Don Laureano approached Mateo with a humble request. "Teach me," he said softly, "how to find peace again." Mateo smiled, not as a victor but as a friend. "Peace begins," he said, "when you choose compassion over revenge, even when it seems impossible." And so the village of San Isidro, once overshadowed by fear, became a place where hope grew stronger than hatred. Children played freely in the streets, families prayed without fear, and the mountains echoed with laughter instead of cries. People spoke of the day Pancho Villa came not only as a rescue, but as the moment when mercy proved more powerful than bullets. In the end, Mateo's simple act of compassion healed a man, saved a village, and lit a flame that would burn brighter than fear ever could. And for generations, their story lived on, a quiet reminder that even in the darkest of times, it only takes one act of courage, one moment of kindness, to change the world.